The Minister for East African Affairs, the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of East African Affairs, Commerce and Tourism, Republic of Kenya, Madam Phyllis Kandie, the representative to the Minister of Hellenic Republic, the General Secretary, Mr. Anastasio Lieskos, Minister of Tourism and of the Hellenic Republic, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Kenya to the Hellenic Republic and also to Italy, Madam Josephine Gaita, Mrs. Vicky Pantazopoulou, I hope I got the name right, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Kenya in Hellenic Republic, Mr. Christos Pallis, the President of the Greek National Tourism Organization, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. A very warm jambo to you. Jambo. Kalimera. Very good. I thought I got that right. Thank you. Now, we'll just show you a very short clip, first and foremost, before we start with the presentation, just for you to have a feel of the destination we are talking about. I know Mr. Christos talked about a magical destination. I want to bring you another magical destination, which is the Republic of Kenya. You ready? Okay, as he's preparing, I'll just continue. You ready? Okay, there we go. Sound. Jumbo clip. Okay. Okay. I think as we're waiting to sort out that, let's just continue. If you can just put the presentation on. Presentation on. You can just continue. Okay, our presentation is basically divided, let's go to the content quickly, into 6 key sectors. We'll talk about the sector in a nutshell, the tourism sector in the country. We'll talk about the country, giving you the big picture. We'll also talk about the tourism performance very quickly and also the reasons as to why we believe we should invest in Kenya. And then we'll also talk about the categories of investments and then specifically zero in on Nairobi and Coast as a destination. As our Cabinet Secretary said, Nairobi is our most prominent county, followed by Coast. I think yesterday my colleague Ruth talked about Kenya. And indeed what we say is that if you do just a simple experiment, please put your hand onto your heart, and I request you to kindly do that. Assume you're standing behind the map of Africa. Where your heart is, that's Kenya when you look at the map of Africa. The factors that you see there, I think those are talked about, so I'll not spend time on that. The location, the GDP, and so on and so forth. Let's move on. And then in a nutshell, when you look at Kenya as a country, in Greece, I know you talked about tourism contributing 15% of the country's GDP. In Kenya, the contribution is about 12%, so it's really a very, very important sector. And also, it is recognized as one of the key pillars that will drive the movement of Kenya from a low-income country to a middle-income status by the year 2030 through our blueprint, the Vision 2030. It also provides it's also a major source of foreign exchange, and also it provides a major platform for employment both at the direct and the indirect level. Again, also, if you look at the requirements, when one is visiting the country, all that you need is a visa, costing about $50. Nairobi basically is the second largest airline hub in Africa. When you look at the connectivity, we have about 120 flights daily, 60% of which are international, and we have daily connections to all the major cities of the world using the major global carriers, from our national carrier, Kenya Airways, which is in partnership with KLM, which is also in partnership with Air France. We have Emirates, we have Qatar Airways, and so on and so forth, and British Airways. So really, when it comes to the destination, it's very well served by a cross-section of the major airlines. Then product variety, I know in Greece you talked about culture and so on and so forth. We also are a multi-product destination. We have a beach product in the coastline, extending about 480 kilometers. We have the famed wildlife safari, because when you talk about safari, I think it is synonymous with Kenya. We also have culture landscapes, MICE, which our cabinet secretary talked about, and to a little extent, cruise tourism, especially through the port of Mombasa. The weather, very fine, tropical, which is excellent, and that means Kenya can be visited all the year round. And we have a fairly developed infrastructure with 4 international airports in Mombasa, in Nairobi, Kisumu, and Eldoret. And we also have a number of regional airstrips that can serve smaller crafts within the whole country. And then on top of that, we constantly say that the Kenyan people are very warm and friendly. And I think that's a virtue you'll agree with me. When you look at the big tourism picture, clearly we have quite a bit in terms of what we can offer. Now, the athletes and the marathoners we talked about, and our cabinet secretary talked about, many of them actually come from one specific region where, when we say this is the home of the athletics, this is the home of marathoners, we have a number of high altitude training camps located in that area, and this is in a place near Eldoret, in Iten, and so on and so forth. And then we also have the Great Rift Valley, which has about 6 lakes, all of which have now been listed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We also have the snow-capped mountain, Mount Kenya, the only one within the equator, which is right across the equator, and it is snow-capped, the second tallest mountain in Africa. We have a number of marine parks and reserves in the coast, and also to the western side of the country, and the Lake Victoria. And then we have the famed annual wildebeest migration, which happens between the month of July and September. And many of you perhaps may have seen this in the Discovery channels or even BBC World Survivor series. And then we also have about 59 national parks and game reserves spread all over the country, which means visitation into the country is all the year round. And the other thing also is that we talked about the coastline, 480 kilometers. I think this is much smaller compared with Spain, with Greece, which I think we were told yesterday is about 15,000 kilometers. But nevertheless, the good thing about our coastline is that it's got a coral reef, which means you can actually be able to swim to a great extent into the sea without the fear of being attacked by sharks or any such sea creatures. Diverse culture. Kenya is a multi-culture destination with about 42 different languages, and that therefore means we have different cuisine, different traditions, different way of life, and that in itself clearly shows that we have diversity when culture is concerned. Many would actually know about the Maasai culture. Yes? Okay, but there are many other communities, including others that perhaps you may not very well know, including also some from the northern part of the country with their own diversity as far as culture is concerned. Abundant wildlife and the home of safari. You would recall that in 1940, when the former president of the US made a visit to Africa, and he popularized the whole aspect of safari, the country he talked so much about was Kenya. And as a result of that, Kenya has become uniquely recognized as the home of safari. And then, of course, for those who are enthusiastic about sports, especially golf, we have about 40 golf courses. The beauty, again, is that golf can be played all the year round. And you have golf courses from the lake region all the way down through the highlands, through Nairobi, to the coast region. That means one can actually enjoy golfing safaris while also viewing the wildlife and the abundance in terms of landscape. From a strategy perspective, we are looking at the country from the blueprint of Vision 2030, becoming one of the top long-haul destinations in the world. And as a result of that, we are looking to see how we can attract visitors from Europe, from Asia, from America to come to Kenya and actually enjoy the abundance of tourism attractions. And from a medium-term perspective, this is by the year 2017, we are looking at increasing our arrivals. You impress us by saying 17 million. Our target in 2017 is 3 million. And I'm sure this is something that is feasible and we can do by working closely together and also learning from you the success stories. We're also looking at increasing our revenue. We are also looking at positioning Kenya as a mid to high-end destination so that we are attracting tourism that will help us in terms of creating sustainability. And we're also looking at increasing our bed capacity so that we can get more people. Some of the unique landscapes being pushed, time is not on our side. So look at that. This is one of the, sorry, just go back. This is one of the central areas in Naivasha called Mount Longonot, which is an extinct volcano. And going around that crater, the caldera, is quite a challenge. Very beautiful scenes, as you can see that. Let's move on. Performance, I don't think I'll talk so much about that, but all that we can say is that right now, and I think the Cabinet Secretary also said it, we get about total consolidated about 1.8 million arrivals, both cross-border and international. Revenue generated is about 96 billion Kenya shillings, which is about $1.1 billion. And therefore, we have quite a bit to learn from you so that we can increase that in terms of revenue. The main contributor of tourism into the country in terms of arrivals is Europe, contributing about 47%, and then followed by Africa. And we are looking to see how we can grow, especially the pie, from the traditional source markets by targeting markets that we have not been our major source markets. And Greece and the Middle Eastern countries of Europe come in very handy. Obviously, we're also looking at growing the pie from Asia, because you know Chinese, obviously, and many of us would know, will be the major travelers by the year 2014, contributing almost 90 million international arrivals. And then in terms of the major entry points, we look at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, which contributes quite a significant proportion, then Mombasa International Airport, and then through cruise tourism, we have been getting about 12,000, which we did in 2009. But the numbers dropped a little bit in 2010 and 2011 as a result of the piracy incidences in the Indian Ocean. But that now has been sorted out, and I think our Cabinet Secretary was very clear in saying the entry of Kenya forces together with AMISOM into Somalia has reduced significantly the piracy incidences in the Indian Ocean Indian Ocean waters, which therefore means that we can now be able to attract cruise liners from Europe. We've had some coming from Germany. We've also had some coming from the US, and we're now looking to see whether we can have some of the Mediterranean cruise liners coming into the country and making a port of call through the Horn of Africa in Durban, moving on to Maputo, moving on to Zanzibar, and then to Mombasa, and then cross over perhaps to Seychelles, because that's the main line that they use, or even go through the Gulf of Aden and then back to the Mediterranean. And this, we believe it's possible because we've seen it happen, and we believe that this is one of the key areas we'll be looking at. Let's move on. Then, looking at the split in terms of the visitation to the country, majority of the tourists coming to the country come to enjoy what we'd call leisure. And that's why the contribution by leisure is about 66%, followed obviously by business tourism, which my colleague Fred Simi will talk about, especially in the aspect of MICE, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions, and then also others coming in, for example, from India, from the US, on VFR, visiting friends and relatives. I'm sure that's a picture we must have seen somewhere. Yes? Very good. This is an annual wildebeest migration in the Masai Mara. Now, the second part of our discussion, we'll move very quickly because I think a lot has been covered by Ruth yesterday, is why invest in Kenya? Because we are not just saying visit Kenya, we are saying also there's a lot of opportunities for you to visit the country and also invest in the country. There is massive infrastructure development, ICT, the recent discovery of oil, and also a new port that is being commissioned in the place called Lamu, under the Lamu project or LAPSET project. This is the Lamu Port South Sudan Transport Corridor, which combines rail and road between our port in Lamu all the way through Isiolo to southern Sudan, and also one arm branching off to Ethiopia, which gives a massive opportunity for somebody to invest in terms of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, massive development being done there. Right now, we expect that once the new terminal is constructed, we'll have a throughput of 9 million transit visitors. Once the greenfield is constructed later, we'll have a throughput of 20 million transit visitors, which therefore means that we'll have expanded our capacity to be able to receive more flights and more visitors. And then there's upgrade of Mombasa Port and Lamu and so on. Quick summary of investments. From our strategic perspective, our bed capacity is estimated to be about 40,000, and we are saying by the year 2017, we need to raise this to reach 65,000 so that we can be able to accommodate the new visitors coming from emerging markets, the rest of Africa, from Europe and Asia and so on. And therefore, we see that becoming quite a major thing. Yesterday, I know we also talked about air connectivity, and we are therefore looking forward to see perhaps some of the airlines that operate in your market, like Asian Airlines, coming or making direct visitation into Nairobi, because truly Nairobi is a hub for Africa. And if you want to reach the rest of Africa, this is the place to go to. Bearing in mind that our local airline, Kenya Airways, has the best footprint in Africa in terms of expansion. Then there are several opportunities also in terms of resort cities, in terms of amusement parks, and convention centers, which my colleague Fred Simi will talk about, both in Nairobi and Kisumu, and also water sports and marine-based activities. Again, also, we are looking at, in our medium-term program, we are looking at having some 4 key resort cities. One is in Isiolo, as I mentioned. The other one is in Lamu at the port city. Then Turkana and also Konza City, which I think Ruth talked about yesterday, which is Christ End as our ICT city. And then the lab site, which I talked about. And then the value additions through diversification of our product offer. And I think we've talked quite a lot about this, including the northern part of the country, which basically is not very explored. Let's move on. That is a graphical illustration of the Konza City, which my colleague Ruth talked about. There will be lots of investment opportunities here from a hospitality perspective, because this we see as our new ICT city. We talked about the convention centers. Fred will explain more about that, both in Nairobi, the opportunities also in in Mombasa, and a few other cities. Then we talked about the bed capacity. We talked about the requirement for additional hotels investment. For example, like in Nairobi, we are in need of five-star hotel within the city and within the airport. So this, again, is an opportunity that perhaps we'll be talking more about, and we'll be seated over there so that we can explain more in details. This is just to give you an overview. And of course, in the whole country, whether it's in the western side of the country, in Eldoret, in Kisumu, in Mombasa, there is a requirement for additional hotels, especially in category 3, 4, and 5, so as to be able to accommodate the increased tourism. Okay, very, very quickly, I cannot stop without mentioning that place, Mahali Mzuri. This is a recent addition, one very high-end property that was recently opened by our president, together with our cabinet secretary. It's owned by Richard Branson in Masai Mara, and there are a number of other facilities that have come on stream. This is a property in Lamu called Majlis, and these are the kind of things that we're talking about when we talk about the high-end properties and high-end visitation when you're from a market targeting perspective. Some of the properties that have come on board, including Kempinski. Then we'll give you, once we sit over there, differentiation in terms of the categories of facilities that we have in the game reserves, whether it's a lodges, whether it's the eco lodges, like this one, which is in Samburu, or luxury tented camps, or star bed camps. We'll also give you details so that for those who want to invest, you know exactly what the requirements are. Sorry, just go back. This is in the northern part of the country in a place called Samburu, Joyce Camp. You may know a major tour operator called Kelly and Peacock. This is a camp that they run, high-end camp that they run in Samburu, which is in the northern part of the country. Amusement parks, again, also these are investment opportunities, especially in the area of entertainment. Amusement parks, theaters, specialty restaurants, and so on and so forth. Then, like we said, Kenya is recognized as a major golfing destination, especially in 2008. We won the world's most undiscovered or best undiscovered golfing destination in Agto. And this is one of the golf courses in a place called Windsor, which is very, very near Nairobi City. Nairobi, I think the coastline, the only capital city, the only capital city which has a game reserve or a game park, 15 minutes drive from the city, host to the UN offices, as we've talked about. Move on. The coast, Lamu, this is listed as a World Heritage Site, and there are lots of activities within the coastline, whether it's in terms of marine parks or in terms of the forests, in terms of the beach, and so on and so forth. I think Ruth talked about that. I need not talk about the guarantees to investment. And finally, what we would say is that the place to be is, no doubt, magical Kenya. Thank you very much.